They said he was dangerous. People didn't just avoid him, they feared him. Mothers pulled their kids close when he walked by. Joggers crossed the street without hesitation. Dog owners shortened their leashes and whispered under their breath. Even the mailman stopped delivering to the door after one look at him and started tossing the mail over the fence. Diesel didn't understand why. He never growled at strangers, never chased cats, never snapped at anything, not even the yappy terrier next door who barked like it was a full-time job. He was calm, steady, predictable. But none of that mattered, because Diesel was a Bullmastiff. Massive, muscular, with a head like a cinder block and a bark that could shake glass. People didn't see a pet. They saw a threat, a guard dog, a problem waiting to happen. That was all it took. One look. No one saw how gently he followed the Johnson kids, always a few steps behind, like a quiet bodyguard. No one saw him sitting patiently during bedtime stories, or curling up beside them during thunderstorms, letting their tiny fingers twist through his fur. They didn't see how he leaned into Mrs. Johnson after a long day, resting his head on her lap like he knew she needed him to. They didn't see how he checked every room at night before lying down by the front door. All they saw was the size, the face, the breed, and they judged him for it. Neighbors whispered. Someone said he looked like a junkyard dog. Another claimed he stared down her golden retriever, even though he was asleep at the time. A new family made it clear they didn't want that kind of dog near their kids. He barked once at a raccoon on the porch, and someone filed a noise complaint. At the dog park, people quietly packed up when he arrived. No one confronted the Johnsons. They didn't have to. The message was clear. He doesn't belong here. But inside his home, Diesel was everything they said he wasn't. Gentle, loyal, loving. He wasn't a monster. He was family. And soon, the world was going to see exactly what kind of dog Diesel really was. He wasn't a monster. He was a pillow for two sleepy kids who always ended up cuddled against him during movie night. He was a moving footrest for Mr. Johnson when football was on. He was a quiet companion to Mrs. Johnson, who often spoke to him like a friend when no one else was around. He followed her from room to room, lying at her feet when she folded laundry or cooked dinner. He didn't need attention, just proximity, just to be there. Diesel knew the sound of the school bus and waited at the door every afternoon, tail wagging in slow, heavy thumps. When the kids stepped off, he would bolt across the living room to greet them, sliding on the hardwood floors like a clumsy puppy, tail smacking everything in its path. He would sit patiently as they read to him, pet him, even dress him up. One Christmas, they wrapped a scarf around his neck and declared him an honorary reindeer. Diesel wore it proudly for hours. At night, he made his rounds. One by one, he'd check each bedroom. He would peek into the rooms, then trot down the hallway, and finally settle by the front door like a silent guardian on night watch. He didn't sleep deeply. He never did. His ears twitched at every sound, and if anything was off, even slightly, Diesel noticed. He wasn't trained for it. No one taught him to protect. But that's just who he was. And that's what made all the judgment outside those walls so heavy, so unfair. Diesel would never hurt anyone, unless they hurt someone he loved. And one night, that chance came, when everything changed. When the people who feared him the most would see exactly what they'd misunderstood. The fear never really stopped, even after months, maybe years, of Diesel walking the same sidewalks, following the same gentle routine. Nothing changed. The reactions were always the same. Some people clutched their bags tighter, turning their shoulders as he passed like the air had suddenly gone cold. Others outright stopped in their tracks, pretending to tie a shoelace until he was out of sight. It didn't matter that he was on a leash. It didn't matter that he walked calmly, never pulling, never lunging. To them, he was still just a threat waiting to happen. There was a woman down the street who wouldn't even walk her poodle until she saw Diesel go back inside. She'd peek through her blinds, waiting. A father once asked the Johnsons to walk Diesel after 9 a.m. because his toddler was scared of big dogs and had started crying every morning on the way to daycare. Diesel had never even looked at the child. And then there was the neighbor with the tall hedge and the perfectly mowed lawn, the one who called animal control. The knock on the Johnsons' door came just before dinner on a Tuesday. Diesel sat at the foot of the stairs, head cocked, ears alert. The officer explained that there had been a report, something about an aggressive dog in the area. Mr. Johnson raised an eyebrow. "Aggressive?" he repeated, glancing at Diesel, who was now lying down with a soft huff, as if bored by the entire event. "That dog?" The officer seemed almost embarrassed when he saw Diesel. He didn't bark, he didn't even stand, just wagged his tail once, slow and lazy, like he knew this was all nonsense. After 5 minutes, the visit ended with a shrug and a polite apology. No violation, no warning, just fear in the form of paperwork. That was the thing about fear. It didn't need facts. It only needed a face, and Diesel had the wrong one. But none of that mattered to Diesel. He didn't see fear in faces. He only saw people. He was content with the love he had, the home he guarded, the simple routines that filled his day, until the night that routine was shattered. It started small, so small no one noticed. The sky was clear, the moon bright. A stillness had settled over the neighborhood, the kind that only comes around 3 in the morning, when even the dogs stop barking and the streets feel like empty movie sets. Inside the Johnson home, everything was quiet. The kids were asleep, wrapped in blankets and dreams. Mrs. Johnson had just turned off the bedside lamp. Mr. Johnson was already snoring softly. Diesel lay near the front door, stretched out on the hardwood, half asleep. But something shifted. It was subtle, a flicker of scent in the air, a change in pressure, something off. He lifted his head. The garage was at the far end of the house, and no one heard the pop of the electrical wire sparking inside it. No one heard the slow, smoldering crackle of cardboard catching flame. There was no alarm. Not yet. Just a silent enemy building strength. But Diesel smelled it. He stood, ears pricked forward. His tail, usually lazy and slow, went stiff. He sniffed the air once, twice. Then came the sound, faint, distant, the sound of something burning. Not loud, but enough. Diesel moved. First he barked, a sharp, sudden sound that split the silence like a crack of thunder. One bark, then another. Upstairs, the kids stirred. Mr. Johnson muttered something in his sleep. Then Diesel ran, his claws tapping against the floor as he bounded up the stairs. He nudged open the first bedroom door with his nose, barking again. Not the playful bark they knew, not the "someone's at the door" bark. This one was different, urgent, demanding. He leapt onto the bed, pawing at the covers, then off again, barking louder now. In the master bedroom, Mrs. Johnson sat up. "Diesel," she said groggily. Then she smelled it, faint but unmistakable. Smoke. Seconds later, Mr. Johnson was out of bed. The hallway lights flickered on. The smell was thicker now. The house was waking up into a nightmare. Diesel herded the kids toward the stairs, barking at their heels, circling back, making sure no one was left behind. His eyes were wild, scanning, calculating. He darted ahead, then backtracked when the younger child hesitated. He nudged her gently, guiding her down, not leaving her side. The moment the front door opened, smoke rushed in from behind. The fire hadn't reached the living room yet, but the garage was gone. Flames were licking the ceiling, black smoke rolling down the hallway like a wave. Outside, the cold air hit them. Coughing barefoot, the family spilled onto the lawn. Diesel turned, ready to go back in. But then he heard something else. A sound across the street, a door opening, a cough. The neighbors. He bolted. Mrs. Johnson yelled after him, but he was already across the road, barking again, scratching at the neighbor's door. More smoke drifted out from the cracks in their garage. They hadn't woken up yet. Diesel didn't stop. He barked louder, more frantic. His paws slammed against the wood, his body a battering ram made of muscle and panic. Inside, a light flicked on. Someone opened the blinds. The door creaked open, and Diesel froze. A man stepped out, confused, half-dressed, rubbing his eyes, then saw the smoke. Behind him, his wife appeared, their baby in her arms. Diesel barked again, then ran back to the Johnsons' yard. That was all it took. Within minutes, lights were coming on up and down the block. Sirens in the distance. People waking to chaos. But they were waking. Because of him. The first fire truck didn't arrive until the sky had already begun to glow orange, not from the sunrise, but from the flames. By the time the sirens screamed into the neighborhood, 2 homes were burning. The Johnsons' garage had collapsed inward, taking part of the kitchen wall with it. Across the street, smoke poured from under the eaves of the neighbor's roof. The firefighters were fast, trained, efficient, but they weren't first. Diesel was. He stood in the middle of the lawn, ash on his coat, panting heavily, his sides rising and falling like bellows. His eyes darted back and forth, not out of fear but out of instinct. He wasn't finished. There were still lights off, still doors closed, still people asleep who didn't know the danger had already passed them by. He barked again, short and sharp, as if trying to rattle the houses awake one by one, and they were waking, but not because of the smoke. It was Diesel. It was his noise, his movement, his persistence. People stepped out of their front doors, blinking into the chaos. They saw him first. Not the fire, not the smoke. Him. A giant Bullmastiff running from porch to porch, barking at windows, banging his shoulder against doors. For a split second, it looked like the very thing they feared had come true. But then they saw the smoke rising behind him, and the truth hit them. He wasn't attacking. He was warning. Diesel reached the neighbor with the newborn, a young couple who had only moved in a few weeks earlier. Their house wasn't on fire, not yet, but the wind had shifted, and the smoke was drifting straight toward them. Diesel jumped at the door. His claws scraped against the glass. He barked again, low and urgent. Inside, lights flicked on. The woman opened the door halfway, startled. Her husband rushed to her side. Diesel didn't wait for thanks. He turned and sprinted to the next house. By the time the firefighters pulled up, nearly a dozen people stood out on the sidewalks, barefoot, wrapped in blankets, some holding children, others clutching phones or pets or each other. Most of them had been roused not by the sound of flames or sirens, but by one dog's refusal to give up. The fire crews swarmed the scene, dragging hoses, shouting orders, forcing doors open. And as they worked, people began to speak. "It was the dog," someone said. "He got us out," said another. "He was going door to door." The firefighter closest to them paused, blinking. "The dog," they pointed. Diesel had collapsed on the Johnsons' front lawn, finally still. His chest heaved with exhaustion. His head was low, his coat was streaked with soot, but his eyes were still alert, still tracking every person, every movement. The firefighter crouched beside him, unsure what to expect. But Diesel didn't growl, didn't flinch, just looked at him and let out a small huff, like he was handing the situation off now that help had arrived. That morning, the street didn't go back to sleep. People stayed outside, even as the flames died down and the air turned to foggy, chemical-smelling mist. They stood there, watching Diesel. The same people who once avoided him now watched him with awe. The same people who had crossed the street now crossed the lawn to get closer. Someone brought him a bowl of water. A child, the same boy who used to cling to his father's leg when Diesel passed, reached out and stroked his head. Diesel didn't move, just closed his eyes for a second, content. Word spread fast. By noon, the story had traveled further than the fire. One neighbor posted a photo, Diesel standing alert as the flames lit up the house behind him. Another shared a short video, grainy, shaky footage taken from a second-story window, showing Diesel barking at the neighbor's door just minutes before the fire truck arrived. The captions weren't sarcastic. They weren't fearful. They weren't calling him the scary dog anymore. They were calling him a hero. More neighbors came by throughout the day, some just to check in, others to leave food or blankets. The same man who had once filed a complaint now stood with a steak wrapped in foil, awkwardly holding it out to Mr. Johnson like an apology too long delayed. "I misjudged him," he said. "We all did." Mr. Johnson didn't say much. He just looked down at Diesel, lying on the porch, finally asleep, snoring softly, tail twitching now and then in his dreams. There were no medals for dogs, no trophies, no ceremonies, but that didn't matter. Diesel didn't want those things. What mattered was this. People no longer looked at him with fear. They looked with recognition, with respect. They saw not a monster, but what had always been there, a guardian, a protector, a gentle soul wrapped in a body too big for comfort. That night, no one crossed the street to avoid him. In fact, when Diesel went for his walk, the neighborhood greeted him like an old friend. Children waved. Adults smiled. Dogs wagged their tails. And Diesel? Diesel just kept walking. Calm, steady, head held high, like nothing had changed. But everything had. The world didn't shift all at once. It never does. Change is quieter than that. It arrives in glances, in hesitant footsteps, in small words spoken for the first time without fear. It started the next morning. The fire was out. The damage was done. Blackened wood and shattered glass marked the places where memories had lived only hours before. The Johnsons' garage was unrecognizable. Across the street, the neighbor's siding had melted and buckled. A smell lingered in the air, of smoke, of char, of everything that could have gone far worse than it did. But somehow, on that street where disaster had just left its mark, there was something else in the air too. Diesel stood on the front porch like he always did, his head slightly tilted, watching the street. Except this time, people didn't turn away. They didn't hurry past him. They stopped. They smiled. Some even crossed the lawn without hesitation. Kids who once clung to their parents now reached for him, hands open, unsure but willing. Diesel let them approach, let them touch the thick folds of fur on his neck, let them lean against him as if they'd always known they could. He didn't ask for attention. But now, finally, he didn't have to. Someone had dropped off a framed drawing, a crayon sketch, a little wobbly, full of bright colors. It showed Diesel with a firefighter's helmet and a cape. Underneath, in uneven handwriting, "Thank you, Diesel. You are brave." It sat on the Johnsons' porch all day. By evening, there were 3 more drawings, and cookies, and dog treats, and one handwritten letter from a little girl who lived 2 houses down. She'd always been afraid of big dogs, her mother said. Always crossed the street, always hid behind her legs. But today, she walked right up to Diesel and handed him a stuffed animal, a soft brown bear with one ear missing. The note read, "I used to think you were scary. I was wrong." Diesel didn't read the note, of course. But he accepted the bear and carried it around the yard like treasure. The man who used to complain about dangerous breeds was the first to apologize. Not just to the Johnsons, but to Diesel himself. He knelt, eye to eye, and said the words like they mattered. "I was wrong about you, big guy, I see that now." And the truth was, he wasn't the only one. It wasn't just about Diesel anymore. It was about the idea of dogs like him. Dogs who looked a certain way. Dogs who had been written off before they ever had the chance to show who they really were. Diesel had become something bigger than just a pet. He had become a symbol, not because he barked, but because he didn't stop barking when it counted. Because he moved when others froze. Because when fire came, Diesel didn't run. He warned, he protected, he stayed. There's a reason the fire chief later said, if that dog hadn't acted when he did, we'd be telling a different story. But Diesel didn't do it for recognition. He didn't care about stories or photos or headlines. He did it because he loved his family. And somewhere deep inside, he understood that love meant staying when others ran. Love meant risking yourself for people who didn't even know they were in danger. Even the ones who had feared him, especially the ones who had feared him. So now, when Diesel walks down the street, he's not a monster anymore. He's the hero of Maplewood Drive, the gentle giant, the dog who proved them all wrong. There's no more crossing the street, no more whispers, only respect, and maybe a few belly rubs along the way. And here's the part that matters most. Diesel didn't change. People did. They saw him for who he truly was, maybe for the first time. And now you've seen him too. So the next time you see a big dog with a broad chest and a deep bark, the kind people avoid without knowing why, maybe take a second look. Maybe ask yourself what fear is really made of, and who told you to feel it. Because heroes come in all shapes. They don't always wear uniforms. They don't always walk on 2 legs. Sometimes they're covered in fur. Sometimes they're silent until it matters. Sometimes they're the very ones we've been taught to fear. And yet, when the flames rose and every second counted, it wasn't a person who saved lives. It wasn't a siren or a uniform or a badge. It was Diesel, a dog judged by his size, feared for his face, avoided for his bark. But it was his bark that broke the silence. His strength that got the family out. His courage that lit up the darkness when others were still asleep. And here's the thing most people miss. Diesel didn't ask for love. He didn't demand trust. He just gave it, over and over again, even to those who never gave it back. And that is what makes him a hero. So ask yourself, how many monsters have we misjudged in our lives? How often do we look at something or someone and decide what they are without ever knowing their story? Have you ever feared a dog just because of how it looked? Have you ever crossed the street, avoided the eye contact, gripped the leash tighter? Or maybe you've known a dog like Diesel, one who changed your mind, one who showed you that love has nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with loyalty. Tell us. We want to hear your story. Share the moment you were proven wrong, or the dog who taught you something you didn't know you needed to learn. Drop it in the comments. Your words could help someone else see a little clearer. And if Diesel's story moved you, if it made you think, feel, maybe even tear up, share this video. Not just for him, but for every misunderstood soul waiting behind a fence, every gentle giant left out in the cold, every loyal heart that only wants one thing, to protect the ones they love. Let's change how the world sees dogs like Diesel, not with statistics, not with arguments, but with stories, real ones, human ones, yours, one heart at a time.